This is Political Psychology, and I'm your professor, Dr. Patrick Stewart. In this lesson, we will be addressing how humans are largely not consciously involved with making leadership and political choices. Indeed, as we will see later, we humans live most of our lives unconsciously. The influence of the unconscious mind has been subject of much attention throughout the years. Until recently, this attention has not necessarily been systematic so much as it has been consideration through the arts and popular spheres. Mathematician Lewis Carroll, in his book, Alice in Wonderland, perhaps captured the flexibility and often random nature of thinking when he had the Queen of Hearts say, "Why, sometimes I've believed as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast." Oddly enough, the effects of parallel processing involves the conscious and preconscious mind, but not necessarily in a fully integrated manner. And this is captured in Yogi Berra's classic quote, "It's déjà vu all over again." Berra explained that this quote originated when he witnessed Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris repeatedly hitting back-to-back home runs in the Yankee seasons during the early 1960s. Scientifically, déjà vu has been connected with preconscious recognition occurring before conscious processing. As a result, we can be aware of things, but at the same time, not consciously aware of them. Smells, such as vanilla and cinnamon on planes and in stores, might not be something that we pay attention to, but we certainly pay attention to and pay money for these smells when we're getting nitrous oxide before dental surgery. Whether consciously or preconsciously, vanilla relaxes people. While research with cinema finds that it makes rooms feel warmer to shoppers and as a result, smaller, leading to the consumer feelings of less control and buying items to raise their prestige. So, even subtle things matter. The truth of our personal realities is that most of our lives are determined by our context and our routines. How often have you driven somewhere and not remembered anything about the route you took? How often have you gone through a day and forgotten what you had for breakfast or even what you did that morning? Mindfulness, the awareness of your situation and your bodily states, is a key component of Stoic philosophy and an attempt to control consciousness. By understanding oneself, there is a better appreciation for that which makes one feel different emotions, and how to change contexts and routines to live a life better. But at the base of much philosophy, whether it's Stoicism or Buddhism or other approaches, is an appreciation for underlying physiology, which means taking a scientific approach to understanding oneself. Our ability to look inside the brain has certainly been enhanced over the recent past, whether through fMRI, functional magnetic resonance imaging, that considers blood oxygenation level dependent imaging that shows where the oxygen is being used as different forms of emotional and cognitive processing takes place, or through EEG, also referred to electroencephalogram, which considers electrical impulses in the brain to trace what action is happening where. We're learning more about how the brain functions. There are also other forms of technology that is being applied, but ultimately, findings concerning how the brain works considers a broad range of sources and not just high-tech sources, but includes consideration of human pathologies in which, when things go medically awry, you track down what has gone awry and what has resulted. Professionally, while I study humans and political behavior of humans, I pay an awful lot of attention to animal behavior just by watching what they do in different contexts. This has helped me understand the neuroscience of laughter, play, and smiles, and their political uses to an incredible extent. One of the more important findings has been that we use parallel pathways to process information from the environment and make decisions. These pathways shade our rational decision strategies. In other words, we may make decisions while not being consciously aware of our decision-making process. We might be what I refer to as post-rational. In other words, we make up rational sounding reasons for why we did something, but we certainly didn't put any forethought into it in the first place. What we see from this slide helps us understand preconscious and conscious awareness. These figures and this table is taken from George Marcus's book, Political Psychology, Neuroscience, Genetics, and Politics, and helps us understand that there is an overwhelming focus of our processing of stimuli on the visual aspects. From there, the auditory channel is the next most important. Together, we see that humans are social creatures at a distance. They communicate, and oftentimes this is beyond that of touch, which while it still matters, it is not as important for communicating as social and political animals. So ultimately, while touch, taste, and smell are incredibly important for survival, they do not take up nearly the amount of bandwidth that seeing and hearing do. Likewise, with processing of information, we see that survival-relevant stimuli are processed incredibly quickly and often before conscious awareness. New data suggests that conscious awareness can occur even at 13 milliseconds for some people with some important stimuli. Another table from George Marcus does a wonderful job of considering how we process sensory information from our environment, somatosensory information from our body, and our plans, goals, and actions. Sensory information comes from our eyes, tongue, ears, nose, and skin, whereas somatosensory information comes from within us, from our muscles, skin, and joints, and reflects the interaction of our body with the environment. Anyone who has had their leg go to sleep knows how body position held for a long period of time, often unknowingly, moves from being largely non-conscious to something that's highly conscious and indeed could be painful. Finally, our plans, goals, and action involve actions themselves and are driven by multiple components, including the environment and what we want to accomplish. Darren Schreiber has made a career of analyzing brain science and politics and has found that different parts of the brain are important for political functioning. Some of his findings in this exciting area of exploration are that, the amygdala is involved with processing fear and other negative emotions such as disgust, sadness, and anger. But the amygdala is also involved with positive emotions, including humor and sexuality, as well as with implicit racial attitudes. The anterior insula is involved with perception of internal physiological states, as well as with empathy. Not just pain, but also pain of social exclusion. When we consider politics, empathy, or the lack thereof, is a key starting point. Basal ganglia are associated with valuation, reward, and decision-making. There's nothing more political than following the money, and understanding, in the words of George Laswell from nearly a century ago in 1936, that politics is who gets what, when, and how. The medial prefrontal complex, the MPFC, is important for social cognition as well as a range of moral and ethical judgments, ultimately political judgments. And finally, as we'll find out later on, the fusiform face area, the FFA, of the fusiform gyrus is responsible for processing basic information about faces and potentially information about gender and ethnic characteristics, and provides assessment of attractiveness, trustworthiness, and dominance incredibly quickly, all things that are involved with leadership choices. Ultimately, understanding politics is understanding how an individual functions in a very complex environment, and one that is growing more complex by the day, both in terms of survival and social functioning. When I was growing up, I found that I had two options. Either I earned money through long hours of work and did not have the time to spend it, or I had the time to do things I wanted to do, but not the money. Regardless, there wasn't the competition for my attention that goes on currently. Now, with these three factors coming from the internet and social media that competes for your attention, as well as your time and your money, knowing how your brain functions and how the mass media and social media compete for time, attention, and money, often with nefarious intent and methods, can help you lead a more thoughtful and hopefully more content life.